welcome back to another episode of whatever this is. My name is Christine Lee, and between the last one and this one, I decided to abandon application engineering. Um, Good news, I stayed in the same division, so I'm still in sales engineering, but now I am a sales engineer. Yippee! But with me today, I have a fellow sales engineer, Adam Koch, and he actually is relatively new to the company, but not new to the industry, and he's had a different trajectory to his career than mine, and I thought it would be really cool to talk about his experience as well as any advice that he has for people in the industry and people like him. Welcome to the stage, Adam.
Thanks for having me.
Yippee!
Pleasure to be here.
So, right off the bat, I know you've explained to me how you got here as a sales engineer, but also to inductive automation. But I thought it was a really cool trajectory. So my first question to you is, how did you get into the automation industry?
The first job that I ever had as like a full-time adult job, right, was a packaging line mechanic at a food and bev manufacturer. So it was the type of place where the mechanics just did mechanic stuff, right? And so I had right out of school went and got a associate's degree at a community college here in the area. In like electrical technology. And after about a year-ish at that, mechanic job, I just kind of was like, I'm not really using anything I went to school for. I also just kind of always saw myself doing something a little bit more technical. And so started looking for different jobs and found a position at a animal health facility, like a life sciences animal health facility in the area, as the title was automation specialist, which kind of funky name, but basically it was just like an automation support tech for their process controls, process automation, as well as like automation SME for projects and stuff like that. And that was a cool job. I learned a lot. Like that was really what got my foot in the door, what introduced me to like, the OT space, the industrial automation space and all that kind of stuff. And then, between there and now is a bit of a long and winding road.
The automation specialist title, I've held it too, but it is a funky name because it can mean a lot of different things. You would just wear a lot of different hats as a automation person and also as a specialist.
Right.
But so when did you encounter Ignition in your career and what was it like at that stage?
So that was a job that I had after that. So I had not had any experience with Ignition throughout my time, like working as that automation specialist, right? Worked with a lot of, multiple other SCADA systems that we had and lots of different controls. But towards kind of the end of my time there, I got that itch to do a little more again, right? Kind of similar to the packaging job when I wanted to move on. And so I actually went back to school and got a degree in computer science. So like I worked night shift for a couple of years while going back to school during the day and got my computer science degree. And after I graduated with that, I got a job at an integrator. And so my job there was a manufacturing intelligence engineer is what they called it. And so basically we worked on a lot of the SCADA development type stuff, a lot of the data collection, trending, and any kind of, data handling stuff for that integrator. And that was a cool job. I liked it a lot. But I think maybe the thing that I liked most about it was like right away, they were basically introduced me to Ignition like right away, almost day one. They pretty much, I started and they're like, hey, we've been a Rockwell house for a long time. We're starting to see more people interested in this platform called Ignition. And you're new. You seem to have a good like programming background combined with your, previous automation experience. So we're going to have you work with our one other guy that has been doing a bit of Ignition work, and we're going to try to do more of this type of work. And it was really cool. enjoyed the job, but also just kind of fell in love with the software. Then, like, it was great. I had never experienced that level of like documentation for a product as well, and like that ease of like getting your foot in the door with the Inductive University and stuff, like that all just sold me right away.
Shout out to the documentation team. Excuse me, Levi. I've never seen a product be documented as thoroughly and detailedly as Ignition is. So, kudos.
Oh,
So, what was your aha moment with Ignition? I know a lot of people, especially when they first start using Ignition, they have those moments of like, whoa.
honestly, it was, I kind of spoiled this one already because I talked about it, but it was right away. It was that, like, as soon as I started diving in, it can be daunting to get into something new when you've been working with like a different software or different, programming language or whatever for a while, and then you start something new. But like jumping in and just seeing how easy it was to get started, and I was like, wow, this is great. Like, it clicked right away. And I think for me, that was like, there's so much you can do with this. It's so like powerful, and it's so easy to take advantage of that power, as opposed to, having a lot of having things be difficult to really get into the depth and the capabilities of the software. So yeah, I would say it was that initial just seeing how well everything was documented and how easily I could get going and start actually developing some really cool stuff in it.
Did you mention Inductive University in your...
I did. I
Okay.
think I did in the last question, but willing to talk about it again because Inductive
Yeah.
University is great. I mean, I still even working here very occasionally will be like, I remember this being like a good video, and I haven't done this in a while, like setting up a certain driver, maybe like
Yep.
a different certain device connection with one of the drivers. So I'll go back and I'll watch like that device driver connection video just as a like reference to like, because they are great.
Still, I go back and watch those videos. Very recently, a couple days ago, I was watching a video on how to set up gateway networking. Because I don't do that very often, but I had to do it for testing. And I was running into trouble doing it, but the video explained very well, very thoroughly how to do my job properly. So shout out to support,
Yeah,
and shout out to our training department too.
for sure.
So you have over a decade of experience under your belt. And in that decade, how much of a change in the industrial automation space have you seen in terms of technology, in terms of trends, etc.?
It's been the era of that like IT OT convergence, right? Like when I started, that really wasn't as much of a thing, and it's my career has pretty well overlapped with that era of that IT OT convergence really taking off, which is a really fun thing about getting to work here at Inductive Automation is like that's a big use for the Ignition platform, right? Is that data connector, getting that OT data into that IT space, and that's been really fun because when I started, I didn't have much to do with the IT side, and my career trajectory has taken me further and further away from the plant floor to where I am now, where I work for the software company that is fully dug into the trenches of that IT OT convergence. And so that's been the biggest trend that I'd say I've noticed, and it's really cool to see.
We just have like rich experiences, like whether it's on the plant floor, whether it's like in the trenches of an MCC room crying in the corner. Please don't put this in there. Etc. But I'm glad that I have the chance to like really sit down and talk to you, because like I've said, like you're newer to the company, and also like I know other people that I've talked to or been on this with, Derek and Mara. They've been in inductive automation for years, but you have a different perspective as a user, but as well as like an employee of this company. So how how has it been working for Inductive?
It's been great, honestly. I mean, yeah, I it's been my favorite job I've ever had. It's been amazing. Favorite company I've ever worked for. The team is great, and I mean, one of the things I really love about the team with the sales engineers here is exactly what you mentioned. Like, so many varying paths to get us all to the same place. So many different backgrounds, so many different experiences, right? And it's really nice, like, when we have our morning East Coast or East Coast sales engineer calls, right? That you sit in now since you joined the team, and we have yeah, we get all of us, and we just start talking about like what we're working on, and I got a pretty good shot that no matter what I'm going to bring to the table in that call, somebody's going to have some kind of help for me, and it's really cool.
I don't know how to really put this in the right way, but I feel like our industry also equalizes us in some way or another. It doesn't matter if you have a bachelor's degree in science and computer science, or you've started on the plant floor and then you did night shift and went to school during the day. We end up in the same place, same rule, different levels. I'm one. I'm not at your level yet, but
You get there.
all to say, like, and so many people have like breadth and depth of information and knowledge, regardless of where they are from, regardless of you've gone to like higher education or not. Like, it truly equalizes us into beings where, I mean, we just collaborate and we just share information, and I think it's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, 100%. That collaborative environment is just yeah.
And I think it stretches farther outside of inductive automation too, but within the vast ecosystem of industrial automation is like I've met people who were just diehard blue collar workers who just wound themselves into a position of like IT, OT, digital transformation. And I've met people who started in that realm of DT or just pure computer science background, and they all collaborate. They all come together. They all discuss how to make their processes better, more efficient, DT, like et cetera, et cetera. So fascinating. I love it. I love industrial automation. It's the coolest.
It is cool.
It's a niche thing to be in, but it's the coolest position to be in. And I like coming into industrial automation and controls engineering, didn't know this was a thing. Like, didn't know what SCADA was. What is an HMI? PLC, don't ask me. What is that? But now that I'm in it, I can't imagine like being out of it.
Yep. Kind of some of the stuff you talked about, we can even relate back to that like IT OT convergence we talked about. Like if you talk about people with varying backgrounds, like I think there was a time where a lot of the people that got into like the automation, OT, like process automation space were people that probably started as like an electrician at a manufacturing facility, and they were like, hey, somebody needs to learn how to program our PLCs because we need to make updates to them. You're the closest thing to as an electrician, you work with the electrical side, you're the closest thing to it. Here you go. This is like, one of your new jobs. And they worked their way into that automation space and did that. And now that like IT OT convergence is a thing, right? And there's less of that separation. You have more, more need for people in that OT space. And so people that would have mainly just gone to school for IT stuff are also getting jobs in the OT space as opposed to the IT space. So that's where you're seeing a lot of the, I think, varying of backgrounds, younger people getting into it that maybe just went to college for computer science or IT stuff and are able to get jobs in the OT space because it's growing and those technologies are overlapping a lot more than they used to, and that's been really cool to see.
So you and I are sales engineers. And I don't think people really have like a full understanding when you tell them sales engineering, what does that really mean? Um, do you engineer sales, like the title? So, what do you really do as a sales engineer?
Yeah, I mean, so there's the whole long description of all the different little things we do, right, and stuff. And we go to all through all that, but like I think the main point to hit on and the main thing to talk about and the most important thing is that customer interaction part of it, right? Like that's probably the most important task is whether it's the emails that we respond to or the customer calls that we get on or the interactions at conventions that we have with customers, but that ability to have technical conversations with customers that like help them understand the Ignition product better, help them use Ignition to the best of their capabilities, and set them up for success implementing our product. And whether that's talking about best practices or what modules they might need for their specific needs, or building helping them build out their architecture. That's there's a lot we can talk about there and a lot we do talk about, and I would say that's the most important thing is kind of being those Ignition educators almost, even, right, like just helping set our customer up for success technically with the product.
So, as a sales engineer, you come across a lot of technologies and a lot of products that come across your desk, your emails, et cetera, your requests for information. Is there something that you're super excited about that's like up and coming, or it's been established and it's just really exciting and cool? Is there something that you're like really into lately?
Obviously, one of the big ones right now in all industries is AI stuff, right? And so, that is intriguing. It's interesting to watch. I feel bad that I haven't kept up with it and kept as relevant and been as into it as I would have liked to. Um, I know there's a couple people on the team that have dove into it a little bit deeper. Um, but that's one that I don't even know if it's like excited is the right word, but more just like interested to see how all it goes, right? Like interested to see where that's going to go, how deep the world, the industry, everything is going to get into that. But yeah, I mean, there's one thing that I am really like seeing a lot is just the scale at which we're seeing these data collection and this data aggregation and data movement. Like and MQTT is a big part of that because of that ability to subscribe to data that's being published from a bunch of different sources and stuff. So that's been really cool. But I just it's so neat to talk to people that are running like millions of tags into like a central historian that they want to store and from hundreds of sites, right? And that's been really cool to see how like a lot of these larger companies are finding ways to centralize all of their data to do and a lot of it is to get for that like analytics or even a lot of that type of AI stuff that you want to train had data to train it on, right? And so that's they kind of go hand in hand, I guess, those two things, that scale, that large scale architectures and stuff, and that AI stuff in a way. But those would be the two kind of off the top of my head that really stick out that I see that I just kind of interested in watching and are just kind of fun to see where they're going.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how AI plays into like predictive maintenance or predictive, honestly, whatever at this point. I know like predictive maintenance and I guess inventory too is one of like big things in the industry. I feel like predictive maintenance and meshing it with AI has been something that I've been seeing and like people talk about in the industry as well as like people within Ignition too. I feel like I've had people ask like, is Ignition going to have AI capabilities for manufacturing, for etc. So it will be interesting to see in the future, like where our product goes, or where we also fit into the whole deal.
Yeah, and I mean, right now we do have a very specific, kind of role in that whole uh, architecture, of centralizing that data, whether it's for machine learning or whatever you're going to do with it, as that kind of middleman almost for all your data, right? That ability to connect your shop floor, your plant floor up to your actual IT systems, right? And so we kind of got a spot there already, but like you said, it'll be interesting to see even as a company where we decide to grow, and within that. So yeah, it's cool. It's just funny. We talk. Everybody's talking about the AI stuff because it's a big buzzword now. And I remember when it first started becoming popular and first really became a buzzword, it kind of felt like just that, a buzzword. And that's probably part of my background is like, coming from like more of a maintenance department where, I'm that natural skeptic, right? Because that's what that's where I kind of developed as, is that just like everything naturally inclined to be a skeptic at first. But I think it's been around long enough and we've seen enough traction that it seems like it's legit.
There's just so much out there in terms of data, in terms of information, in terms of ability with AI too. It's like, what can you do with it? Like the capabilities are endless, truly. So I'm excited. It might not be the right word. I'm interested in the future of manufacturing when it comes to artificial intelligence. Your note about scale, the like sheer size of these architectures and what these like enterprise systems are dealing with in terms of data transfer. That's one thing that I've learned very quickly in sales engineering, like just during training and just transfer of knowledge and shadowing calls is like these people are not playing.
Nope.
They are not playing with their data. They are not playing with their systems. And I like see their architecture and I see their system as already really efficient. And they're still trying to find ways to be hungry for more efficiency.
It's the information era. We're in it.
Before you joined sales engineering and also inductive automation, like have you ever encountered these like massive, like challenging architectures, or did you already have experience dealing with just massive influx of data?
Not massive, like as when we're talking like hundreds of sites and hundreds and like millions of tags, right? But like I had been around, so like the job that I had right before coming here was at another food and bev manufacturer, and I was working for their IT, their corporate IT, and I was working kind of running OT projects type of stuff, and we had actually standardized on Ignition as platform to where like progressively rolling out a full front end, back end, split out, scale out architecture at each site, and starting to centralize data, with a corporate architecture as well. And so we had a larger enterprise scale out architecture that was decent sized. It was 40 some sites all going back to one central enterprise uh, gateway, which was it was neat to see. And that was my first exposure to like, oh, people are doing this at some scale, right? Like people are connecting these gateways in this type of like hub and spoke model where it's an enterprise architecture, not just a site SCADA. But nothing like what some of the stuff that we see customers doing at a really large scale, when, like I said, we're talking about like millions of tags and hundreds of sites and all historizing it for years and stuff. It's pretty wild.
So, if you had any advice to people who are making career moves like you have, what would it be?
Honestly, just walk your path and always be learning. Like, find what you like and follow it. One of the reasons I decided to go back to school is because one of the things that like really interested me when I was working as an automation specialist was when I started doing more on the like supporting of our server based systems like the SCADA platforms, our batch system, and stuff like that. And I started taking on some of the support of our actual VM hosts that we had for some of our critical servers, right? And that stuff interested me, and I was like, hey, maybe some of this like IT stuff is kind of cool. And then I also would play around with like some of the really silly simple tasks that I could do, just kind of automating them with like batch scripts and stuff. And I was like, okay, well, this could be like programming could be fun. And so I decided that going back to school to kind of really learn about that stuff, to set myself up to try to get into doing that kind of stuff was what I wanted to do. And I think that's just what I would tell them is, find something that does interest you and learn about it, right? Always be learning, always be growing, and don't be afraid to change.
So I know you said you enjoy video games. What kind of video games?
Give me a game with a good story mode that I can just like dive into and play, you know what I mean? And like tune out the rest of the world and like just kind of live in my fantasy world of my game, like
Yes.
give me some, Legend of Zelda or Skyrim or something like that. Like, yeah, give me one of those. That's more of my vibe. But I like silly stuff too. Like the most recent game that I'm playing is just an indie game called Shadows Over Loathing, and it's actually like part of a series. But it's all like it's silly. It's stick figures for the most part. It's all black and white. It's all like it's a comedy game, so there's all little silly jokes put into it, and it's just kind of quirky and fun.
If you had to pick your favorite dish, whether you are the most proud of it or it's like the best recipe, whatever, what would be your to-go dish to cook?
Like that I cook,
Sure.
that I can make. I'm gonna like I'm gonna show off my Midwesternness here and go with tater tot casserole, just because it's like a classic. It's like just such that like Midwestern vibe, and I had it so much like growing up and stuff. Even so, it's got like some nostalgia to it for me, and I feel like I make a very good tater tot casserole as well. So it's that's probably the first one that comes to my mind.
My last question to you is about 8-3. What are you excited about 8-3?
I'm excited about a lot of the like core functionality changes, the config and stuff all going to the file system, right? And as well as the new API, the new RESTful API for config and stuff, right? I think that provides a lot of really cool deployment options that we haven't had before, right? Whether it's containerizing things and managing them through Kubernetes or something like that, or if you're wanting to do like version control for your gateway config as well as like projects. We have customers doing that like version control stuff on projects now, but now you can version control an entire gateway config right through Git or something like that. And so I think it's those core changes that moving stuff to the file system and having that RESTful API that you can hit for config and remotely configure a gateway with those are really neat. They may not seem as flashy, right? Because they don't, you don't see them, but they're really cool. There's a lot of neat stuff that people are going to be able to do with that.
Yep, as a personal fan of containerization and version control, I'm really excited about everything being in files because right now, the way that we have version control for the projects is great, but the ability to do all of that, including the gateway, and like we don't have to go through all the steps where we deal with gateway and like tags as well, just other things that
Yep.
are a
Yep.
little convoluted currently is gonna be solved with for all of that.
For
So
sure.
I'm really excited about that. Um,
Yeah.
in the interest of time, I know I love yapping, but I think we need to wrap it up. So, well, thanks for sitting down and yapping with me today. My first interview as an SC with a fellow SC. It was great to like sit down and talk with you and your experience. Yeah, thanks for talking to me today. And people who are watching this, thank you for watching or listening. But yeah, that's it from me today. If I have advice for you to go with, wear sunscreen.
Sunscreen.
That's
I
it.
like it.
Thanks.
I like it. Awesome. Thanks for having me, Christine.
Absolutely.